Hello, it's Rick in Rochdale, and welcome to the Touchstones tapes, the podcast where you can explore, discover, and keep connected with Touchstones while it's closed for redevelopment.
It's Bryan in the studio today, and our lovely Katie is in the collection store. Hi, Katie.
Hello, Bryan and Rick. We're bringing nature into the collection store today because we have Jennie Victors, who is the Creative Learning Manager at Touchstones. And amongst her many projects, she's working with young people in schools to learn more about their local environment and the animals and other bits of nature that are underneath their feet. So if you care about the environment and protecting our planet, then keep listening.
Excellent. Thanks, Katie. Looking forward to it. Let's go.
So on today's episode, we're going to be speaking to the woman behind the amazing work Touchstones has delivered to engage schools in climate-focused projects. It's all about climate change, it's all about nature, it's all about what we can do to become carbon neutral. So today I'm joined by Jennie Victors, who is Creative Learning Manager at Touchstones. Hello, Jennie.
Hello, hi.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Just catching up after a busy weekend doing lots of activities around Earth Day. So it's been a really fun time for looking at this subject.
And you're a regular at the collection store, aren't you? So none of this is new to you.
We regularly bring students here to look round behind the scenes. We've got lots of exciting things to show them about life behind the scenes at the museum, things they don't normally get to see. It's like sharing a big secret.
I bet they really enjoy seeing the behind the scenes bit and not just like the displays in the museum.
They absolutely love it. From the arrival in the car park that looks completely unpromising to their arrival in the main area that's got all the books on display, and then when we go through each room, like trying to guess what's going to be in the next room and the next room, particularly if the lights aren't turned on and it all looks a bit spooky, they're sort of shrieking away. They're very excited to come here.
Do they have a favourite bit? Like, is there one sort of aspect that usually makes them more excited than anything else?
We go backwards and forwards between the rooms, and we always kind of end up back in the Gracie room, which is a room with a picture of Gracie Fields on the wall, and that's kind of their anchor because they all get a bit frightened that we've got lost in the museum. We're going to have to spend the whole night in there, and then they're like, oh, we're back in the Gracie room, it's okay. And in that room we talk about all the different jobs in the museum, like what's an archivist, what's a conservator, what's a curator, what's the difference between those jobs, how does a technician help, how do you get a job in a museum? And there's stuff they've never heard before, and we get a lot of them saying afterwards, like, I'm going to work in a museum, I want to be a paleontologist. So it's really exciting.
That's brilliant. Yeah, we need more people to go into this career. So your specific role at Touchstones, can you tell us a bit more about what you do? Because it's quite a big role, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big role. There's a lot to do. I'm the Creative Learning Manager, which means basically that I'm in charge of managing the schools programme. So we mainly work with Key Stage 2, but we also do project work with younger and older people. And there's a small team of us. I think technically there's 2.8 people, but there's 4 of us on different sort of contracts. And we sometimes go into schools to do outreach. We run sessions at the museum and the store. And we provide resources and projects and activities and try and partner with the other museums in the town sometimes as well.
Brilliant. That's a lot of work and a lot of young minds being shaped for the future. I can see I'm just really distracted by the object that you've brought in for to tell us all about, because it's really beautiful. So tell us a little bit about the object that you've brought in and how that relates to what we're talking about today.
Sure. Yeah, it is a beautiful object. It's a scientific model of a plant, of a buttercup to be specific. And we've got about 10 of them, I think, in the collection. It's made of paper mache, and it's about 40 centimetres maybe high. The base is wooden, and then it's kind of the rest of it's made of paper mache and painted in the right colours. It's as scientifically accurate as possible. So we use these plant models when the children visit the stores. One of the sessions we run is about classification and trying to identify species and by their characteristics and put them into groups. So we start by giving them a collection of something like shells or buttons and ask them to sort them and ask them to explain their rationale. And then we draw keys about how to go from one big group to smaller groups to smaller groups. And then we give them a key and ask them to try and identify some of the plant models using a key. So they've had experience of creating one and then using one to identify an object. Most of them get it right. The objects themselves are quite fragile, so we have to handle them really carefully. And the children are really good at doing that and being respectful of the objects, but looking in detail. They really enjoy observational drawing. So we sometimes use taxidermy in the collection as well, or the entomology, which is like mini beasts, and they look really closely with magnifying glasses, and then we ask them to label models or specimens. So with the plants, they look at the different plant parts, see if they can identify them, and we also we look at the differences between the things that we've collected. So if it's different flowers, they look at how many petals, what are the texture of the leaves, like that kind of thing. And then they look at variation and difference and how that might affect the way the objects are grouped in the scientific world.
Well, it's lovely. I mean, I would never have guessed that's made out of paper mache, because it looks like it's like ceramic, like really fine ceramic or something from here. It's very shiny.
Yeah, it is, and it's bright yellow as well.
Yeah, it's lovely. So that kind of leads nicely into a big project that you're working on called Explore Urban Nature. So what is this project? Like, what's it all about?
So the Explore Urban Nature project is a partnership with the Natural History Museum in London. We're one of, I think, 10 or 11 regional partners. We're the only one in the Northwest delivering the programme. And the idea is to ask children to look at the wildlife that's on their doorstep and then to think about how they can increase biodiversity. So we run various sessions. We tend to run 2 sessions with each school that's participating. We run an outdoor session, which is usually at Broadfield Park, which is opposite the museum. We're very lucky to have a lovely green space close to the museum. And we go to the pond there and we do some pond dipping. And then we also do another session on tree identification as well, and looking at what it's called Talking Trees, and it's about what trees can tell us, what information they hold. And then we do some indoor sessions, usually here at the store, where we look at classification. That's one I just explained. And it's a 3-year project. So in the first year we had, I think, 4 schools participating, and then in year 2 we've got 7 schools, and then there'll be a 3rd year where we go up to 11 schools. And it's been a nice project because it's the same schools year after year, and we build up the number, but it means we get to really explore the relationship with the school. We can extend the project by going into school and running some extra activities, so the children have the opportunity to participate in a CREST award, which is like a British Science Association award for individuals, and they complete various activities and then they can get an award. And they're really fun things to do. Like we've done worm charming, where we were playing.
What on earth is worm charming? Because this sounds like something I want to do.
We went into a school and tried to get the worms to come out of the ground and to get the children to experiment with different ways to do that. So we stuck a fork in and banged the fork to see if the vibrations would bring the worms to the surface. And then we tried musical instruments. We tried seeing whether banging a drum was better than playing a woodwind instrument.
Wow.
And we were doing all this in the middle of a storm. So the kids were having a whale of a time, getting really muddy and filthy dirty and waving their hands around and they all found loads of copious amounts of worms that they were kind of like holding up to the sky.
Sounds like some sort of Saturnalia or something.
The teacher was like, what the hell are we doing? But it's great because it's the kind of thing that I think, schools maybe don't have time to do as much of in the curriculum at the moment, or maybe they don't have the resources or the knowledge or the confidence to do that. So we go in. I'm accompanied by a colleague from the Ranger Service who also does some freelance work, called Judy Alderson, and she's absolutely brilliant at getting the kids enthused and engaged about science, and she's got an amazing general knowledge. She can answer all their weird and wacky questions, and comes up with really fun activities that appeal to the children. And they're sort of doing science without necessarily even knowing that they're doing. It's the kind of questions they ask about why and how that bring it back to science, but it stems from their curiosity. So it's really fun and nice, and I think really enjoyable experience for them.
And do you find that young people are really engaged with the environment from a sort of climate change point of view already, and they're interested to learn about that?
Yeah, this project's aimed at Key Stage 3, so it's been a really nice chance for us to work with older children, older young people that we don't work with day in, day out at the museum, and we also engage up at Key Stage 2 as well, so they're sort of like 9, 10, 11-year-olds, and they're all really clued up about what's happening to the environment. Sometimes there's quite a lot of anxiety around that, and they feel a bit powerless, like they haven't got the agency to make the change that's needed. But I think doing things collectively, so when we do the pond dipping, we do a clean water survey, we do a bit of litter cleaning. The pond is situated in this park, but it's right next to a big dual carriageway, so it's very noisy and it doesn't look very promising in terms of wildlife. We do a bit of a walk around and clear the litter away, and then we ask the young people to guess how clean the water is, and most of them say dirty, not going to be a lot in there. And then we do the pond dipping exercise, which is a bit like a competition where they have to spot as many different species, and each species has a point attached to it, and the one that gets the most amount of points wins the session, and they get really competitive. But they also see the biodiversity right under their nose. There's 10, 20 species in the water that show that the water's actually quite clean and it's thriving, and suddenly they really care about the pond, and they want to make sure no one else throws litter there, or figure out how they can make a pond in their own school. Or a lot of the project leads them back to thinking about how they can make improvements in their local area or their school grounds to increase biodiversity. So we'll see by the end of year 3 what changes it's brought about. But I'd say generally they're really switched on, they're really engaged with the subjects, and they want to do as much as they can.
Well, I think if people listening don't know Rochdale, yeah, it's part of Greater Manchester, but it's also sort of right on the edge of the South Pennines Park. Well, I suppose you call it a park, South Pennines anyway. So it's really beautiful. Like from the town centre, you can see the hills of the South Pennines. So does this kind of help them connect with that as well?
Yeah, I mean, the project's called Explore Urban Nature, so it's specifically, you don't need to be in a big countryside area to take part in the project. Sometimes it's really surprising we do something called What's Under Your Feet, and you can put this foot template anywhere, and if you look closely, you'll find signs of life, you'll find moss or weeds, or you might find mini beasts. So it kind of can go from one scale of things thrive in any environment, and what can we do to diversify or increase the numbers, but right through to children who are living with birds of prey and foxes and badgers on their doorstep. And I don't think any of them get a better or worse experience when they're considering their local area. It's just about being more observant and more engaged with protecting and increasing wildlife. So it's just a different experience depending on whether they're in an urban or a rural environment. What I would say is another project we're involved with called Linking Schools, which is about bringing schools across the borough together. Is quite interesting in that respect, that children from urban schools mix with children from rural schools, and then see how their lives are different and similar, and explore that. One of the sessions we're doing now is looking at their environment and creating a piece of ceramic work so that it all goes together in a big sort of collective landscape, and the things they choose to make are quite different depending on their experiences. So some children do trees and flowers, others do parks and gardens, and then quite a lot of them do things inside like computers. And so I guess a lot of what we're trying to do is get them outside and into nature in whatever form we can.
Obviously your remit in your role is huge, but with this work specifically, what's your personal kind of connection to nature and climate change, and do you have personal feelings about that, and like, do you have a personal passion for teaching young people about that?
I do. I'm really passionate about the subject. It's funny because I'm an artist by training, and I came into museums through being a freelance artist. But one of my jobs was working at Gallery Oldham, a neighbour to Rochdale, and they have a natural history curator called Patricia Francis. Hi, Patricia. And she taught me loads about natural history, and I loved working with the collection there. And when I came here, I'd previously visited with my daughter to see Dippy the dinosaur, and was really excited about that connection with the Natural History Museum in Rochdale. And when they suggested doing the Explore Urban Nature project, I was over the moon. I was like, oh, I can go back into that world that I really like and learn from people who were really passionate about the subject, people like Judy and the science teachers we work with, like Rose Edmondson at Failinge High School. They just exude knowledge and enthusiasm, and that comes through their students and filters down to me and what I've learned through working with them. And yeah, I've got a daughter of my own, so I'm thinking about the next generation. She's 8, and about what we're leaving behind for the young people that are involved in these issues. And I think we need to get our act together and listen to them. They're more in tune and know what to do, and we have to hurry up and get on with it.
So obviously that's why the work is so important, because you recognise the need for young people to understand what's going on with the world. But do you have any plans for because obviously Touchstones as a building is closed at the moment, but a lot of the work you do is outreach anyway. So what projects are kind of on the horizon to build on this work?
Well, as I mentioned, Judy also works with the Ranger Service, and as she's mentioned about doing more collaborative work with them, which would be brilliant. And we've recently done the project called The Wild Escape with the Art Fund, which was actually an art project, but again, it was about biodiversity and animals escaping the museum and returning back to their natural habitats, and then looking at how we can help animals to thrive in their natural habitats. And that project involved partners from the Town Hall and the Pioneers Museum at the Cooperative Heritage Trust. And I can see working with them in the future is going to be something we do more of, and hopefully more, I was already saying after the last Earth Day, can we do one next year? Let's get it in the diary. Because I think it's really nice to work together for our programmes to overlap and to use the agency and resources we've got and the knowledge and contacts to do things that are visible and high impact and that can help make a difference.
I mean, you mentioned that the wild escape and the birds escaping the museum. There was some quite interesting taxidermy hanging around. Could you tell us a bit more about that? Because I find, as a vegan, I had people in the office checking that it was okay for me to be in the office with them. But I was like, well, as long as they've died from natural causes and no one's gone out and killed them for this taxidermy, then yes, it's fine.
Yeah, we had a lot of furry friends last week in the office. Yeah, we've invested in some taxidermy through the projects that we've had that we're funded, and we've done that so that young people can get up close to the nature that we're asking them to be interested in and engage with. So we tried to do it as ethically as possible. We looked at I'm part of NATSCA, which is like a mailing list for anybody working with natural history in museums around the country. They put me in touch with the Guild of Taxidermists, who have a list of accredited taxidermists. And I looked for people that were practicing in our region and contacted them. And then I met a really interesting guy called Jed, who was very helpful and has created some pieces for us, because the animals that were escaping from the paintings, I wanted children to see scientifically the difference between the stylised versions of them in paintings and the real life versions of them up close. I also wanted children to be able to see adaptations that those animals had, so we had a tawny owl made, which has got very sharp beak and claws and different patination on the feathers. Its head turns, in a...
all the way round.
Yeah, can't think of the right words, but and just want the children to be able to understand that up close, because it's really hard to see an owl in the wild, and two, you'd never get that close to it, and just to understand, that these things are precious and we need to protect and understand them and live with them and find ways of encouraging them of nurturing them, I guess. So Jed works really ethically. I think that he donates money to charitable wildlife trusts in return for animals that are deceased, and then turns them into specimens. And we're really lucky to have them. They're really beautiful examples. It also means children can touch them. So if somebody isn't sighted or would like to understand more about the difference between different types of birds and their adaptations, then they can have a really close encounter with them as well.
Yeah, it was a very tactile experience having a little stroke of a tawny owl. Yeah, it was very soft. It's the softest thing.
And we got a robin and a swallow produced as well. And I think just looking at the scale, a tiny robin and then this big owl, you can understand why one's a predator and one's prey. And the swallows, for the Earth Day, we were lucky enough to have Bird in Hand Theatre Company, who produces sort of big swallow kites, and we're flying them around number 1 Riverside, and it was really nice to be able to point to the real one, which is tiny. It's like about 8 centimetres or something, and say that's what a real one looks like. So yeah, they were really popular on the day, with lots of people queuing up to give them a stroke and offer us some names as well. I think they quite fancied naming them.
Oh, well, I suppose if they're going to be used in future, it might be nice for them to have a little name.
Yeah.
Alliterative names, obviously.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So from that and all the work you're doing as Touchstones is closed, what do you envisage? How do you envisage the programme that you're doing in the new building? So when Touchstones reopens, do you think there's going to be a lot of resources there for young people to learn about climate change and nature and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a focus for what we do. We're talking about producing co-produced exhibitions where, through the work we're doing with schools and young people, trying to introduce that into the displays. And also the programmes that we run with schools, making that influence the things that are on display too, so that we can run sessions and have relevant objects on hand to talk about. And a lot of the work, hopefully, even though the funding for the Natural History Museum project is only 3 years, we're already talking about what legacies we can build on from that, and how we can sustain some of those programmes going forwards, and what collections are relevant that we can make sure are around the building. And then just generally in terms of the new building, I'm hoping that we'll have lots more art facilities where we can offer really exciting activities to people that they couldn't do in school or at home. So hopefully things like a kiln and an animation studio, some things that will provide a real experience, and where we can use those to perhaps bring into the science programme. So that we produced an animation with an artist called Vincent James for the Earth Day celebration, which again looked at animals escaping from the museum back to the wild, and it was lovely, and it'd be great if we could do more things like that with young people in the future.
Thank you so much, Jennie, for telling us all about those projects. I'm really excited to see what the exhibitions will be in future that are informed by young people learning about urban nature. So thank you very much.
Thank you, it's been really fun.
And I'm also looking forward to seeing what names I come up with for the taxidermy animals.
You go, Katie. Enjoy the peace and tranquility that only nature can bring.
Before we go off to go and explore the great outdoors, we want to thank you all for listening to this month's episode, and to Audio Always for helping us make our podcast.
We'll be back next month with a new episode. In the meantime, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Touchstones tapes on whatever app you use to listen to your podcast.
And follow us on our socials. We're on Instagram at Touchstones_Rochdale, or you can search for us on Facebook by putting in Touchstones Rochdale.